Hello, everybody in the body. That's right, everybody in the body. We want to say hello to you. This is Java Madison. We're here on another edition of Book It. And I'm so glad that you decided to tune in. Hey, listen, you could be doing anything on tonight, but you decided that, hey, you wanted to come and hang out with me and our special artist within Adventism. And I'm just excited. You know, we've had a power pack filled 4 weeks. We had on 8/19, April Cunningham, Embracing Your Journey, right? You know, the importance of, understanding the different stages of your journey and embracing it, being in the moment, not focusing too much on the past and not having so much anxiety about the future, but embracing where you are right now. That's April Cunningham. And then we had Pastor Myron Edmonds. He did an amazing job on just how important family is. Hey, listen, if you are just a one-day Christian, right, you're missing out on what the Holy Ghost wants to do in your life. And his book entitled Life-Changing Family Worship suggests that, hey, we don't have to wait until the weekend on Sabbath for the Holy Spirit to be an encounter in our lives. We can have that at our family altars. And what happens in the home should impact what happens in the church versus what happens in the church impacting what happens in the home. And then on last week, Getting Out. Wow. Brian Stewart, he was fantastic. We really enjoyed him, about how God knows how to bring about his plans for you. So in his book entitled Getting Out, he chronicles the deliverance of the children of Israel out of Egypt, the Exodus, and how God was able to block the abortion of Pharaoh when he tried to abort Moses and all those children that did were subject to his onslaughts, but God was able to protect Moses. And then God used the very people that Pharaoh sent to do his dirty work to protect him. And so God has a way, friends, to really bring about his purpose, his intent, his design. It's the classic, Jeremiah 29:11. That's right. I know my thoughts towards you, my thoughts to prosper you. And so I hope that you have enjoyed those individuals. But on tonight, we have one of my very favorite persons, in my Christian experience. We have with us on tonight, Pastor Dr. Delory Brooks. That's right. He is the pastor of the Juniper Seventh-day Adventist Church there in California. And he has written a fantastic book entitled Restoring the Music. And we are going to talk about, how you can get your clef note back on tonight, how you can get the music back. And he's going to tell you what all that means right here, right now. I want you to welcome him with your heart emojis, welcome him with your likes and your shares, and let people know, pull up, as we welcome Delory Brooks. Dr. Brooks, how are you, sir?
Hey, man, I am fine. I am great. I am wonderful. That is a beautiful introduction. My man, I need you to travel with me some spaces.
Hey, listen, man, I am here. I'm all for it. You know how we roll.
Yes, sir.
Man. Hey, listen, I love the way you direct, right?
Yeah.
I was able to, have the privilege to be under your tutelage and mentorship while at Andrews in the seminary. And you and your wife, Dillis Brooks, you guys are just phenomenal. You are a real gift to the body, man. And if I could start some trouble, right now, man, I would dare say here in Southeastern Conference, man, we could really use you all's ministry.
Oh, man, God bless you. And
yes.
We have no problem visiting, but we have absolutely no intention. God would have to do something amazing to move us. And part of that is not because Florida is not ideal for us, but right now my wife is in the middle of her doctoral studies, and we've committed to being here for this season of our lives to develop and finish what she has started there, and she has begun a beautiful ministry or continue her ministry at Loma Linda University.
Yes.
But hey, God, we trust God, as you are well aware of as part of our testimony. So wherever God would lead is where we would gladly
go. I know. I did say I want to start a little trouble, man. But you guys are just amazing. That was my point,
Yes,
and
God bless you.
and man, it would just be an honor to just see you guys in action on this side of the hemisphere,
Amen.
So listen, your book,
Yes.
right? You've got this book. It's entitled Restoring the Music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Share with our viewing audience, what is the essence of this book? What made you come up with the title, Restoring the Music?
Okay. I think I wrote somewhere that I've filtered all of my young adult ministry experience through music. I grew up in a big church in the Northeastern Conference, the Linden SDA Church. And the entire time of my development, I've noticed that we always had music around us. My mom sang in the choir. My sister and I sang in choirs. I sang in a singing group. My wife sang in a singing group, recorded music. It was just a part of our development. And one of the things that I noticed that at our church is that regardless of your age, there was a choir for you. There's the children's choir.
Sure.
There was the youth choir. There was the young adult choir. And then there was the we called them the senior choir, but they became the church choir. And then twice a year, we would have the mass choir. That's all the choirs would come together for Easter and Christmas. But what that showed me is that there's this developmental line that we could see in how we had our members in music or developed in choirs. And that same thing holds true in the secular world, in the non-church world. Where you're supposed to be, whether it's in school. You know what happens at certain ages when you're out of school. At this age, I could get a job. 16. At 16, I can drive a car. At 18, I have to register to vote. At 21, I could drink. At 25, I can rent a vehicle. We know these things and we learn these things growing up. Yet somehow in our churches, when it comes to developing leadership, it stops at a certain age, or it doesn't even start. If you didn't already have that as a part of your lifestyle as a family, when you came to church, no one was there was trying to help you to develop that. So it's one of those things that's where it was. And our churches, because in my church, we had a lot of music. I was like, well, why aren't we restoring that? Why aren't we keeping that going so that we can keep a continuum of leadership being developed in our local churches?
Okay, so if anybody just tuned in, I'm here with Dr. Delory Books, and we are talking about his book entitled Restoring the Music. So what you're saying essentially is that your love for choirs, your experience with choirs and mass choirs, you kind of discover a silver lining that this ministry, a critical ministry in the service of the church, that goes without saying. But you are saying that and you said this in your book, that this safe place, this place where individuals, particularly at an early age, there are different choirs for different ages, right? But when young people particularly have an opportunity to sing in a choir, are you saying or suggesting that there is some type of development of leadership skills that is an outcome of them being inside of the choir?
Yes. And I also believe that this rubric that we create when we have different kinds of choirs in our churches, we could look at that also and use that same rubric as leadership development steps. Because if you were in a youth choir, the youth choir that I was in was actually led by a young person who was only like 2-3 years older than everybody else in the choir. She just loved music. And that's what started our youth choir. Our youth choir was started by somebody who was about 17, 18 years old when I was 13. And we got together and we worked hard at that thing. But that was how we developed leadership at our local church. There was no elder that came and said, you all need to do this. It was developed with us. And then as we grew, we gained people who would support and who would be our advocates at the board level. And because I was a part of what was starting there, that also raised my profile, quote unquote, in the church, so that I could start being a part of other aspects. So I think that does lend itself to leadership development as well.
And so this is a big key, because you're saying that in the church. So for anybody who may have missed it, Dr. Brooks, you are viewing leadership development, the progress of leadership, maybe even the void of leadership, through the lens of music, which is why you have the book entitled Restoring the Music. So in some ways, you are suggesting that we need to restore this leadership continuum. You're saying there's something missing in the church. Music is missing in the church. There's a melody that's missing in the church. And you are saying or suggesting, from what I glean, is that a part of the music that's missing from the church are our young people. They bring life. They bring vibrancy. They bring this music, this noise, this activity, this melody to the church. But for some reason, it seems as though it's starting to wane. Maybe it's lacking. You talked about how there is a void of youth in the church and we need this music. Here's what you said. You said here on this one particular instance, there was a lot of resistance. Talking about your childhood in those days of a bunch of teens hanging out in the church. We used to get whipped for being out in church, for you. The deacon comes and say, get inside the church, right? You said, even though all we wanted to do, here it is be in community. And this is possibly one of the reasons why we don't see youth in the church, because they don't feel connected. You mentioned that in your book. You said you wanted to be in community, to be accepted by our church family, and be supportive in our activities. And so music was one of the ways you found that support.
Yeah.
What did that do for you?
Well, what it did was,
and I know you said it allowed you to be visible and feel supported, but psychologically, how did it impact you?
I'd like to think that the longest relationships and friendships that I've had throughout my life was always in people who were in music groups with me. So we either sang in choir when we were kids, we sang in choir when we were at Oakwood. They might have been a part of our singing groups when we went back to New York, or they enjoyed singing with them at some point, or creating music. And what I've learned from that is there is a community that we create when we're able to create music together. Now, what I talk about in the book is actually the need to develop our leaders through this idea of there's always music. And when we don't have, like you said, young people in our church, because young people can still be present, but if they're not allowed to lead, then they're not going to be there for very long. What choir allowed for us as young people was that we had an investment in the worship service, because we had our Sabbath. There was going to be, I think we sang every third Sabbath or every fourth Sabbath, whatever it was. We knew there was a Sabbath that belonged to us, and our choir was going to sing, and we were going to sing the songs we liked. And that grew into we would be able to lead the worship in a way that would keep us paying attention. So whatever the pastor was going to speak on, we were in the pulpit, so we couldn't leave. So those sorts of things lent themselves to our not just wanting to be and remain involved, but we could see the holes, places where we were like, how come we're not doing this particular thing, or why aren't there more young people in this area of church administration? And that gave us the opportunity to be able to get into some of those spaces. And unfortunately, for some people, it also discouraged them and made them walk away.
Wow. Listen, this is so critical. I hope our viewer audience is capturing this, because what you're suggesting is that we have to have an intervention, right? That has to be intervention. And here's what you said on one account. You said today there's a disconnect between the youth and the leadership of the church, with fewer and fewer young people attending church. A hole has been created in the membership where the young people used to be. Yeah. So if we don't create these moments, these safe places for them to be involved, they end up walking away. You said the question for me then becomes, is there something that can be done in the church, the African American church in particular, to stave off this graying in the church? Listen, if we don't do something to intervene, to call our young people to be involved, then this graying could be a disappearing of the church completely. You know, also you said there is music that is in the leadership of the young adults that, when captured, will positively affect the culture of leadership in the church. The music will keep us moving forward. I mean, to be able to have young people involved, from your experience, and I don't know if you did a survey on this, what does that do psychologically to the members who are up in age to see their young people in the forefront?
I think one of the things what we learn from having young people at the forefront, it gives energy to any church. Any church that has active young people immediately has energy. And there's a freedom in worship when there are young people involved, because we get to see what they're happening. The research that I did in my book was followed up later on in another book called Growing Young. And it talks about these keys that are necessary for people to develop, handing off leadership to young people. And what I say specifically is, as it relates to the Black church, there is a culture of leadership development that has always been a part of Black church, regardless of denomination, that seems to have been lost in the late 70s and early 80s. And it continues to decline as we are not leading young people or developing them to be leaders in the local church and giving them the freedom in how to grow ministry. Because that's when young people start to walk away. They feel like, I'm hearing you say something, but you're not doing what you're saying. So I'm going to go and do what I believe the Lord is leading me to. And I'm not convinced that that is about sitting in your church for 2.5 hours or 6 hours on a Sabbath, or 8 hours on a Sunday. I'm not convinced that's the way God wants me to move, because young people want to be active. They want to know that they're doing something. And even more than that, they want to know that their church is doing something, because young people have no problem being involved in a church that is doing something in their community they could see positive change from. But unfortunately, when our churches are not open to being transparent or authentic, young people, when they develop and recognize all the stuff that they quote unquote might have missed when they were kids, say no, they don't want to be a part of something like that.
Let's go ahead and press this note. There's a note that we need to hit. We need to hit a note. We need to hit this note so the people in the audience can understand the what's at play here. This is what you said. You said there are some factors. So we're about to give you some red meat. There's some factors causing our youth and young adults to walk away. So we want to stop this music from being lost. We don't want to lose the melody. We don't, the young people from walking away from the Adventist church, and in many instances from their faith altogether. So, hey, if you want it, here it is. Write it down. Here's the first factor that you said: alienation, right? Alienation. They feel unaccepted by their churches. All right. So when we get up and we bash them about what they look like and how they dress, and how they act and how they like to congregate, they want community. If you had something that was being said that would reach them, they probably would be inside, right? Or if they were able to be involved, they would probably be inside. So you're saying alienation. Some felt as if they were not needed. This is good. Or valued by their churches. Also, irrelevance. they perceive the church as either not interested or simply clueless to their generation's need. So instead of beating their generation up, we need to figure out what is their generation up to. What? Because I mean, with the pandemic, Dr. Brooks, I mean, it's widening that gap, you know, in terms of our ability to reach them. And I heard it said on yesterday that our young people in 10 years are not going to want to see somebody sweating and pacing back and forth behind a porcelain pulpit. Help me, Holy Ghost. That's what he said. That's what the doctor. That's what the good doctor said. So he said we better figure out how to reach them now, right? You know, other factors. It says intolerance is another reason why they are walking away. A common thing among many other dropouts involves sensitivity to and the distaste for the intolerant attitudes they perceive in the church. A number feel very uncomfortable with the image they see their church projecting as the only true church that is holier than thou. Young people don't want to feel like, you know, belittled.
And that's really one of the issues that we have to contend with as in the Adventist church, especially when we're claiming this title of being the remnant church. That we are the only ones that can make it into the kingdom because of our Sabbath keeping practice. Yet, if we are not projecting Jesus first, our Sabbath keeping is not going to do anything for us. And young people see that quickly. They learn that fast, especially when you have other denominations who are also preaching a Sabbath doctrine. Their Sabbath doctrine is not connected to end times, but they are still preaching time for rest. So if this young person has an opportunity to learn about rest and they can still be a part of a community that is active outside of the church, outside of the walls of the church, our distinctives as it relates to understanding prophecy doesn't mean all that much to them. This is one of the things that I try to teach people all the time is when you have a doctrine that's based on fear, what do you do when the people aren't afraid anymore? And our young people are growing up not being afraid of what we used to be afraid of. They're like, that's not scary to me. You know, what's scary to them is gluten. What's scary to them is what's happening with the atmosphere, you know, climate change. What's scary to them is being able to, thinking that they're not going to be able to breathe the air in the world. What are we doing about that? You preaching on Sabbath doesn't mean as much.
And, you know, not to get off subject, but, you know, environment change and climate change has everything to do with the Sabbath because it's dealing with, you know, the impact of sin on God's creation. I digress. Hey, you know,
I get it.
Yeah. So in your book, here's what you said as we make a transition. The local church should invest time and energy in developing, you called it ships. So like choir would be a ship in youth ministry, and acknowledge the needs of their young adults in their congregation. So essentially, you know, because music is your bin, that's your gift, one of your gifts, one of your primal gifts, your primacy gifts. You know, you see how being in choirs, etc., was a ship to develop leaders, right? You know, but you said that music isn't born, it's made. You got to make music, you know. I feel my help on that one, you know. I can't help but think about my wife, you know, when I consider making music, you know. But you said music isn't born, it's made, right? And in this regard, you're talking about leadership. Again, you're using the metaphor of music, and you're saying leaders, they're made, they're not necessarily born. Is that what I'm suggesting or hearing you say?
There is work to becoming an effective leader, just like there is work to the creativity. Some people can create a top of the hat. It's not even a hard thing, But there's a level that you want, when you want to create more or be more broad, then you got to spend some time in it. When it comes to any kind of creating, whether it's the thinking in your mind to be able to put the words down, or if it's the sitting at the piano to try to knock out the notes, or sitting down with your guitar and trying to strum, all of it takes work. And when we're thinking about leadership, there is the leaders, there are people who are born, but leaders are made. And there's this phrase that we'll use, that they were a born leader. But what we recognize is there were certain personality traits that we saw that we attribute to leadership, but it doesn't mean that that person was born a leader. It just means that they have personality traits that we attribute to leadership, and that we put that label on them. Now, if we just expanded the attributes of what leadership looks like, then we can see leaders in any child, not just the ones that do particular things that we like.
So here's what you said. You said good leadership doesn't just happen. It has to be cultivated and developed. The church seriously working at youth ministry will be working at developing leadership skills among the youth. You also said that in developing this this leadership and being intentional, what choir did and what Pathfinders does and what other children's ministry or children's church, what these different emphases do is creates koinonia. And what you said is that koinonia means Christian fellowship or communion with God, or more commonly with fellow Christians. The church is supposed to be a community of acceptance, ministry, and corporate action.
My goodness, I said that.
You said that. And the Holy Ghost is on you, man. Hey, parenthetically, I find that a lot of our authors, man, are impressed at the Holy Ghost in moving upon them to write, As publishing director, parenthetically, I just say that I've read that as our writers write, she says that the Holy Spirit is over their shoulders, guiding their pen. Right?
I believe it.
Yeah. So I've seen it. Hey, listen, I'm working on my doctorate, and I've read my work, and I said the same thing you said. I wrote that. My editor said, "Yeah, that's not my words; those are your words. I just cleaned it up." But koinonia is important to young people, and if they are ostracized, if they are pushed out of the way, the church is essentially shutting up the melody of their soul. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's great.
Talk to us about that.
Oh, okay. When we are not developing our young people to lead in the local church, then they don't want to stay in the local church because there's no investment for them. There's nothing keeping them there. The song, if you will, that they could have authored is now going to be played somewhere else. And what tends to happen is they either put that in to their vocation, they'll put it in their education, or they put it into their relationships, and see no value in coming together in the local church. And they'll go and create a church of their own. They'll create a space where they feel heard, seen, and recognized. They'll go into spaces where they're accepted and loved, despite their issues, whether their issue as the church would place on them who they choose to love, or whether their issue is how they present themselves to the world. They'll go and find it somewhere else to do that when we aren't open to be able to hear their music.
Wow. So this is what you said. You said, I will always feel uncomfortable to know that there is supposed to be someone to take your place. But that is the circle of life, to borrow the phrase from the Lion King. And then you said, what we should be striving for in youth and young adult ministry is not, here it is. This is the bombshell. I would say this is one of the most critical statements in the entire book. We should be striving for in youth ministry and young adult ministry is not a circle of life, but a circle of leaders.
Yes.
And so oftentimes in various ministries that don't tend to feel youthy, people are very protective of their position.
Yes.
And they don't want to let it go. They've been doing, I've been clerk for 30 years.
Right. And they hold that as a badge of honor.
Yes.
When all that is a cementing of the death of your church.
Oh my God.
That's all you're confirming.
Somebody tweet that.
Your church is on its way out.
It's on its way out.
You're proud of being able to hold on to a position. That means in 30 years, you couldn't find nobody to replace you. In 30 years, you couldn't see someone who had your skills or could have exceeded your ability to be able to move that thing that you do forward. You were satisfied with what you did from year to year for 30 of them. That's a problem. The issue that I have, and that comes out in the book as well, is our inability to want to see someone take over for us. And it's not until our leaders, they're tired, they're worn out, they're burnt out. That's when they start looking, I need somebody to take my place. But when you had the energy to be able to support somebody to take your place, you ain't want to do it because you thought your position was you. We are not our positions. We are not the roles that we hold in our churches. We are the people who God has allowed to be in spaces, to be his hands and feet in whichever space that he allows us to in. We are supposed to be not only the reciprocals of his love and his care, but we also supposed to be pictures of that same love and care to pour into other people and help them to develop so that we can step out of leadership while we still got energy so we can support the new person who goes into leadership. One of the big issues that came up in the surveys that I was doing is a lot of young people had these negative leadership experiences where they were pushed into leadership and no one supported them, or they were voted into leadership and they weren't trained. And you might even be familiar with this. Some kids got voted into positions that they did not ask for, weren't told that they were supposed to do, and never got help. So when they did something and then it wasn't, quote unquote, to the standard that the former leaders had it at, they got talked bad about. And so they were like, well, why am I going to do something? Why would I put up with this? And literally, there are only certain kind of personalities that do, because most walk away. It's like, I don't need this. This is volunteer work. I'm not getting paid for this. And then you don't even give me no support. And you're not going to at least say, at least you tried, put a pat on my back. Nah, man, forget that mess. I ain't sitting through that. I'm out.
Wow. Listen, this is just to sum it up. That was great, right? This is what you said. The music of leadership hasn't been continually playing because the present leadership hasn't been willing to teach the music to their successors.
That's
Boom.
it.
All right. Here it goes. The existing leaders must not only acknowledge the presence of potential leaders, but use their capital within the church to hand over the keys of leadership.
Yeah.
My God. I mean, I'm going to keep going. So you said, what's stopping the music? No matter what type of music, you just mentioned this, in your ministry, there are myriad of factors that stop the music of leadership continually from playing, right? And I'm just going to rehearse it really quick. Churches are held up because pastors stop and start, right? This transfer of leadership, so you got one vision going this way, another vision going that way, and the young people at times, get lost in the fray, right? But the church must develop a continual path for young people to grow. I mean, if this is not intentional, then they're going to naturally get lost, in the cracks. So this is what you said, and we got to wrap up here next 5 minutes.
Okay.
You said churches lack motivation. So that's one reason why the music stops, because churches lose the energy. Another reason why the music stops, teenagers don't feel comfortable. So you mentioned that. You said they're voted and they aren't told, right? So they're not comfortable with the transition. Why does it stop? You said there are not as many authors and pastors that teach and write about how not only to practice young adult ministry. So we need education, right? Yeah. Can you hear me now? You said the young adults' attitudes toward leadership are impacted by the awareness of their pastors to involve them early. So some of the factors why this music stops is because we don't start early enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is critical. This is why children's ministry is so critical, right?
Yeah. But the other part of that is also because of the transition of pastors and leadership, when a new pastor comes to a church, it's critical that pastor get to know their young people. They're going to get to know all the old people that are going to cause a lot of problems for them in the church at some point, or who are going to be their allies. But if they don't get to know the young people don't keep a connection to the church. Wow. Because that pastor is more often will be there, especially in small churches. The pastor is their connection to the church. Yeah. So if the pastor never reaches out, the pastor doesn't know them, doesn't know their names or whatever, they don't have that connection. Pastor doesn't ask about them when they're not there. That's the connection. And you can, and if the pastor does that early, it's easier for kids to stay by because they like, the pastor knows me or the pastor's looking for me. How many of the stories you think about of your own childhood and involvement in church have to do with the pastor spoke to me, or the pastor was looking for me, or because I wasn't there, the pastor did whatever. We don't have, if you have a lot of those stories, you're probably still involved in church. If you don't have a lot of those stories, you're probably not in church anymore.
Wow. Listen, as we close, we're going to deal with Luke 19 real quick. But before we do, this is what you said in regards to where your survey suggests young people identify where they feel like they were developed. And you said that most young people feel like they were developed in church. Come here, Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
you know, all these great singers, right? They started in church. In the choir.
And a part of that survey that we were doing were among young people who were attending church or who had attended church pretty regularly. And the issue there was, where have you developed? Where was the place you developed leadership? Where did you get the most information as it related to your leadership development? And these are young adults, so they're between 18 and 29. So a lot of most of them found that their development was actually in church. It was being involved or doing a youth program or whatever. So there is value to leaning into your young people in order to help them develop their leadership.
So listen, as we wrap up, I just want to share real quick, what you suggested in regards to young people, being involved. And you mentioned, Luke 19, right? So Luke 19 was about, Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, he was called by Jesus, to come and hang with him out of the tree. So just wrap it up, put a bow on this about how we can get our music back and we can keep young people, inside the church.
Okay. And this is not just about keeping young people in the church. It's about developing the young people who are there so that they can get other young people into the church. It's developing their leadership ability. And it's something that our churches have already been doing. And so if you're one of those churches that struggle with developing or getting young people, develop who you have and trust them to go out and get more. So what we do and what we recognize in Luke 19, we realize that Jesus is he's passing through Jericho, and they say, behold, there's this man named Zacchaeus. He's a chief tax collector and was rich, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. And I use that as basically our rubric, our beginning idea. Zacchaeus will represent young people in our church. And they are kept from being able to see Jesus because of many times the leadership in our church. And these kids want to be able to see Jesus, but they have to find their own way to him. And they've got to manufacture a way for them to see Jesus. And what I love about this story is that while they are attempting to manufacture a way to see Jesus, Jesus never lost sight of them. He's always seen them, and he knows exactly where they are. So no matter what has been happening in their lives, no matter how people have been treating them or how they've been looked at, because remember now, Zacchaeus is a tax collector.
Yeah.
This dude is, as far as everybody else is concerned, this dude is a crook, and he's not even accepted to be able to go to worship with them. Think about all the people who are kept out of your worship services just because of how we view them or how we look at them. And our young people in today's day and age, they feel more akin to the people that are kept out of church than the people who are coming into the church. So think about that. But one of the things that we talk about in our book, when it comes to seeing leadership being developed, is the first thing you have to do is accept our young people. First thing we have to do is select who are we going to be working with, who are we going to work on, and who are we going to put in places of leadership.
And that's what Jesus did with Zacchaeus.
That's what Jesus did with him.
You come down.
He saw him and he selected him. He said, Zacchaeus, you come down, because I'm going to your house. And in doing that, in saying I'm going to your house, he immediately accepts Zacchaeus where he is. He doesn't say, Zacchaeus, you got to learn this 15-point program. Zacchaeus, you got to straighten this up. He doesn't say Zacchaeus has to do anything else. He says, Zacchaeus, you come down, I'm coming to your house, and we're going to walk there together. And what's interesting about the people who are at Zacchaeus's house are not the people from the church. The people who are at Zacchaeus's house did not aren't at the local church school. The folk who are at Zacchaeus's house are the only people who accepted Zacchaeus when the church is ready to put Zacchaeus out. And so when Jesus goes to Zacchaeus's house, he is able to have access to all of these other people who the church didn't accept. So if you select who you want to lead and you accept them where they are, the next thing I tell people, or I teach people, and it's in the book as well, is that you've got to model and mentor. You sit down with them and teach, actually show them what it looks like to lead. This is where I say those people who have been holding on to leadership positions for so long, if you would have jumped out of leadership earlier, then you would have been able to walk with young people and teach them what it looks like to lead. The next thing is you equip them. You say, I'm going to support you, but I'm also going to equip you. I'm going to give you some tools to be able to lead in a way that is God honoring and community building. That's what our responsibility is as a generation that is ahead. And then we've selected, we accept them, we mentor them. That means you got to walk with them, go to their house, but then we equip them, we give them the tools to be able to be successful in leadership. And then we're willing and we send them for service. So you can send to go do this whole thing again. You could send them to go somewhere else and lead, because one of our issues when it comes to our local church is that we want to develop our young people to be leaders, to try to make them stay at the local church. No, you're supposed to develop them so that they can go and do the same thing somewhere else. Jesus is the Great Commission. We're supposed to go and teach and make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, man. And when we're able to do that, we bring music back to leadership in our local church.
I can hear some music. I can hear the music, man.
When we do that, we restore the music that was a part of our church as it related to leadership for so many years. And it's not like we can't do it anymore. We might have to learn some new songs. We might have to learn some new people. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility. God has given us all these particular gifts and talents to be able to support our young people. And I don't want to get on my hobby horse, because this is my big hobby horse right here. The challenge for those who are in leadership is sacrifice. If you're not willing to sacrifice to see your young people develop, then you aren't worthy of the leadership you currently hold, and you're going to watch your church die. And and I know that's real stark. That's real hard.
But listen, we need the truth. We need the truth.
But that's how that goes, man.
We need the truth. That was a note that need to be played. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Hit that note. You hit that note. You know what I'm saying? Don't you just hate when people sing, man, and they don't hit the right note? That was the right note. Well, hey, listen, this is our time. You can go to waterspringsmedia.org to purchase a copy of this book for every leader out there in the church that is desirous of reaching the young people, studying how to develop atmospheres to transition them into leadership. This is a book that you want to go and get. I'm not sure if you have a website or anything that you would like to share.
I do not right now, but the book is also available on Amazon and at barnesandnoble.com.
Yes.
You can actually right now, I believe on Amazon, you can get a Kindle version of it. If you if you're a Prime subscriber, you can actually get an Amazon, a Kindle version of it downloaded for free, I think, right now. So God bless you. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about this book. I don't get to do it that often, so I appreciate and count this as a privilege.
Yes. Well, listen, for those who would like this book, go ahead and put your email in the chat box right now, and we're going to email you a free Kindle version. Did you hear what I said? We're going to purchase a Kindle version for you. We're going to email it to you. All right. So right now you're typing your email address in the chat box and we'll get that out to you on today. I'm so glad for your time. Thank you for spending these moments with us, and we will see you on next week. Thank you, Dr. Brooks, for this amazing time. Amen. But